Welcome today as we celebrate hydrangeas. We will be discussing two varieties, a non-native and a native variety, and we'll highlight their growing conditions. The Zone 7 Gardening Virtual Plant Clinic series highlight native and other plants suited to grow well in our Mid-Atlantic USDA Hardiness Zone 7 gardens. These series of clinics are sponsored by the Virginia Cooperative Extension, two land-grant universities, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University. Staffing our plant clinics are Master Gardeners from the Fairfax County Master Gardeners. To our topic for today's presentation on Celebrate Hydrangeas with Elizabeth and Elaine. Over to Elizabeth for part one for Hydrangea macrophylla.
Hi, how are you today? And I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite plants. And I'd like to start this presentation by saying I have made just about every mistake you can make growing hydrangeas. So I've learned the hard way. But the Hydrangea macrophylla also has other names: big leaf hydrangea, French hydrangea, hortensia, mophead hydrangea, lace cap hydrangea, and it's often called the snowball plant, although you don't hear that as often anymore, having it being called the snowball plant. So on to all the things I have done with hydrangeas. The hydrangea is a shade-loving, woody, perennial deciduous shrub that produces bell-shaped flowers or flat clusters encircled by more prominent flowers. And I think my first mistake was I didn't really understand the difference between a Hydrangea macrophylla and a Hydrangea paniculata. The macrophylla is the shade-loving plant. The Hydrangea paniculata grows in direct sun. So when you decide to buy a plant, determine whether it's the shade-loving hydrangea or the sun-loving hydrangea. Hydrangea's countries of origin include Japan, Korea, China, and Southeast Asia. It thrives in regions 7A to 7B, and it blooms in spring and summer on old wood or the previous year's growth. That's another area where you can make a big mistake. Okay, and so what you have are these ball-shaped flowers, and then you also have the flat clusters encircled by flowers, and that is called lace cap. It kind of looks like a little cap with the flowers all around it. These are large plants. They grow 3 to 6 feet tall and 3 to 6 feet wide. And so it's really important. And one of the mistakes I made when I started growing hydrangeas was just not to leave enough space. So make sure you leave enough space between the plants so that they can grow 3 to 6 feet tall and 3 to 6 feet wide. The blossoms are white, pink, blue or purple, lavender, depending on soil acidity. They make good cut flowers. They make great dried flowers. They are long lasting on the shrub, and they are showy and popular, especially for weddings. And I will give you a little bit of advice about cutting hydrangeas. And the advice is, if you're going to cut them, put them in a glass vase with water. These are not the kind of flowers that do well in fluorofoam, because if you put them in fluorofoam, they will be wilted by the next day. So they really need to be in water. They're most productive when you keep them in areas of morning sun and afternoon shade. They will tolerate sun if you keep them moist. They like dappled sunlight, and they can arrive in deep shade. They're tolerant of clay and sandy soil, but need supplementation of organic material if you plant them in the clay. And they need good drainage, occasionally wet, mulched to 2 inches to retain water. And again, as I said earlier, plant them 3 to 6 feet apart. Now, this seems to be an area that people just love to talk about, which is, how can I turn my pink hydrangeas blue? And how can I turn my blue hydrangeas pink? So this seems to be a very popular topic of discussion, and you can do both. But the question is, what is the pH? And do you really want to turn your pink hydrangeas blue and your blue hydrangeas pink? Sometimes if you experiment, you're going to end up with a very funny color of gray or a very deep purplish color that's not nearly as pretty as the pink hydrangeas or the blue hydrangeas. Given the fact that you can turn them pink or blue, the color depends on the acidity of the soil, and the blue flowers come from acidic soil with a pH of 5 to 5.0 to 5.5. And to change your flowers to blue, add aluminum sulfate to the soil. Pink flowers come from alkaline soil with a pH of 6.0 to 6.5. And if you want to change your flowers to pink, add lime. Quite truthfully, you might do well to measure the acidity or alkalinity of your soil before you plant, so you know what you're going to get. To keep white hydrangeas white, you test the pH level in the soil and keep the pH level between 6.0 and 6.2. I bought a white hydrangea at a nursery. I paid a lot of money for it. And the first year I had 1 or 2 white blooms. The second year I had, some little pink tinge around the sides. And the third year they were bright pink. So if you want your white hydrangeas to stay white, you're going to have to be vigilant about measuring the pH level and making sure that it stays somewhere between 6.0 and 6.2. The benefits, they're easy to grow in shade. They have attractive flowers. They're colorful. They attract pollinators. They attract hummingbirds. And unfortunately, they also attract deer. Okay, common pests for hydrangeas include aphids, Japanese beetles, spider mites, and slugs. And I think we encounter a lot of these same pets in our perennial gardens. And so I think you need a strategy just to battle them for everything, including your hydrangeas. Okay, diseases. Diseases can be difficult. Generally, they're pest and disease free, but they can develop leaf spot, bacterial wilt, powdery mildew, and Phytophthora. The Phytophthora, as you know, will kill your plant. The leaf spot is mostly just a nuisance, and it's important to cut off all those bad leaves, pick them up, and get rid of them. The bacterial wilt is also something that you need to be watching for, because what will happen is all your leaves will wilt, and that will be a good clue to what's going on with your plant. Landscaping use. These are great container plants, and you will enjoy having them on decks and patios. You can use hydrangeas in various theme gardens, such as the Asian garden, a children's garden, cottage garden, cutting garden, and shade garden. They make excellent accent plants. They're good for foundation plantings, hedges, mass plantings, and screens for privacy. And some companion plants to be around them. You would want to put in shade-loving plants, shrubs, perennials, or annuals that are in organic mulch beds. And some of these would include azalea, rhododendron, coral bells, hostas, ferns, and ornamental grasses. And so I chose the photo right over here so you can see some of the different plantings that have been planted with the hydrangeas. You can see the ornamental grasses and the ferns that are with them, which just give you a very nice feeling of ease and low maintenance. Propagation, the hydrangeas will send out shoots, which is called layering. The new plant remains at least partially attached to the mother plant while forming new roots. You can also do leaf cuttings where you place several leaves in water, and when the roots are 1 to 2 inches long, you can plant. You can also do stem cuttings. You cut below the stem node, you slice through the node, leaving 1 to 2 leaves, apply rooting hormones, and plant when rooted. That would be roots of about 1 to 2 inches long. And here is another area that we need to think about when we have hydrangeas. Not only how are we going to maintain our colors, are we going to keep them in the shade, or do they belong in the sun? but different types of hydrangeas need to be pruned differently. Ideally, you want to plant your hydrangeas in an area that allow luxurious growth and don't require much pruning. You would prune to revitalize old plants, to increase your bloom size, to remove dead plants. Or if you had leaf spot, you would want to prune all the leaves away. Fortunately, if you know, Hydrangea macrophylla produces buds on old wood. Now, I think this is an interesting point because I have seen people who just simply whack their hydrangeas to the ground, either in early spring or late fall, and they have no blooms the next year. And that's because they whack away the old wood that produces the new buds. The stems are called old wood if they have been on the plant since the summer before the current season. And new wood are stems that develop during the current season. So you need to make sure you understand your new wood and old wood. And I'm going to give you a picture so you can see. These are examples of buds and leaves on old wood. And on the left side, you can see the little green buds that are coming onto the old wood. And on the right side, you can see that the leaves are forming on the old wood. And it's really important that when you make cuttings of your hydrangeas for vase arrangements or whatever you want to do, if you're bringing them into the house, that you only cut the new wood, you leave the old wood. So you would cut down maybe 6 to 8 inches to cut the new wood and leave the old. There are many cultivars. This is a wonderful plant, and you can find almost any color that you like. But the one that I'm showing is called Glowing Embers. And you can see it has bright pink hydrangeas, it has yellow blooms, and it has almost some purple. And of course, with the big leaves, it's a very attractive plant. And here are my photos and references. All my photos are from North Carolina Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox. And then my major source is from North Carolina as well. And then I found a wonderful article on when should I prune my hydrangeas. And this would be very useful, and you can get a lot more information about them. And then we do have our own Virginia Cooperative Extension fact sheet on when to prune hydrangeas. So these are my sources. All I can say is once you learn what you're doing, when you learn to keep your macrophylla in the shade and your piculata in the sun, you're going to have a very good experience with hydrangeas.
Well, compared to his showy cousin, the Hydrangea quercifolia is more of a native plant that's like staying in the background. Hydrangea quercifolia, also called oak leaf hydrangea, is a multi-branch deciduous shrub which is native to the southeast, more around the area of Georgia, Florida, Mississippi area, with tall, white, fragrant flowers, and it can grow up to 6 to 8 feet in height. It's normally more up to 4 to 6 feet in height, but it can get larger. And the quercifolia part of its name comes from the Latin quercus, which relates to the oak shape of the leaves. What I like about this plant is that it has 4 seasons of interest. If you look at the leaves, they're about as large as your hand, about 3 to 8 inch long lobed opposite dark green leaves. So it's a very coarse texture in the landscape. So it tends to stand out. In the summer, it gets those nice showy white flowers that are 4 to 12 inches long and long erect panicles. And the native one slowly fades from a white to a purplish pink. In the fall, it gets this really good red purple fall color, and it stays a long time. In the winter, you have your dried flower pods, and it has exfoliating bark, which gives it 4 seasons of interest. So even in the winter, it looks great. For the site and climate conditions, again, this is an understory native plant, and it grows in Virginia, but natively it's along bluffs, moist ravines, or moist woods, ravines, and stream beds. It prefers moist, organic, well-drained soil. It is a low maintenance plant that is erect, mounding, irregular. It prefers sun to partial shade, and it does appreciate a summer mulch to help retain its moisture. It has a lot of benefits to wildlife. It's attractive to butterflies and other insects. The songbirds love eating the seeds. Fortunately, it's not deer resistant. The deer do love it, but it is one of the best plants for the edge of woodlands, according to a research book called by Durr. It's good for the shrub border, massing heads, or shady situations, or as an accent with its coarse texture. And it's good for use in rain gardens to help retain water on the site. And you can use it in dried flower arrangements in the fall for the dried flowers. I found there are a lot of cultivars available. So what I did is I called one of the major nurseries, because it does me no good to tell you some cultivars if you can't find them. So here are a few that I've picked out. A Snow Queen is 4 to 6 feet in height, and its white flowers slowly turn kind of a purplish pink with age. There's another one called Alice, which is 5 to 8 feet in height, and its white flowers turn a nice shade of light pink. So I have a photo here of showing you how it is with a light pink. Also, there's a few other ones that I wanted to mention. You have Snowflake and Jetstream and some other ones like that. And they also have a double flowering variety as well. If you have a smaller garden, you probably want to go with one of the smaller varieties. There are a few available. One is called Ruby Slippers, which is a compact form, 3 to 4 foot tall by 3 to 5 foot wide. And when those white flowers mature, they turn a ruby red, and that has a deep, rich mahogany red fall foliage color. And this is for a small garden. It's more one that instead of putting it in the more of a natural setting, you can do it in a more formal setting, like in a foundation planting. Sykes Dwarf is a dwarf mounded cultivar. If you want something even smaller, it's 2 to 3 foot tall and 3 to 4 foot wide, and has smaller leaves and flowers than the native variety. It doesn't have many pests and diseases, which is nice. It says some susceptibility to leaf blight and powdery mildew, and then occasionally may get aphids or spider mites. You don't really need to prune it unless you feel it's getting too big. There are flowers on the old wood, so you want to prune right after flowering if you desire. And for propagation, as was mentioned before, you can do it by seed, division, layering, cuttings, and you can also use tissue culture. I had a number of references. I had a fun time with this. There's, again, Dirty Hardy Trees and Shrub, which is a reference book that I enjoy using. Manual Woody Landscape Plants also had a lot of photos of this. The Missouri Botanical Garden was great for describing the different cultivars. And then you get to North Carolina State Extension, Penn State, University of Kentucky, and then our own Virginia Cooperative Extension has a bit more on rain gardens, if anyone wants to look into that a little bit more.
Thank you, Elaine. That's wonderful information there. I really appreciate, the multi-seasonal use of that. So let's see, let's turn to gardener's tips for June. So in June, we can deadhead our spring flowering perennials as the blooms fade. We can cut our irises stalks down to the crown when they finish blooming, but leave the foliage alone. If your iris are overcrowded, then now is the time to lift them and divide them. And then also check for chromosome iris borer. Watch for bagworms feeding on many gardening plants, especially juniper and artibardi. Water all the plants that plants, shrubs, and trees deeply and thoroughly as needed. Also, now is the time to apply a balanced rose fertilizer, something like 10-10 or 10-10-10 or 12-12-12 after the first show of blooms is passed. Now is a good time when the night temperatures stay above 50 degrees, which we have no problem right now, to bring the houseplants outside for the summer. You can also bring out like your hibiscus that you brought in before the frost that's inside, bring it out, put it on your deck. Also now I'm going to be bringing my amaryllises that I had at the holidays, and I'm going to be finding a spot underneath the shady shrub and planting those into the ground too, and then leaving them there until frost, and then I'll be bringing them in. So most houseplants can be brought outside, but they prefer a bright spot that's shaded from the afternoon sun. So check the soil daily during hot and windy conditions for the houseplants, and also any of your container plants as well. We had one question submitted during registration asked, let's talk about bees sometime. We typically always talk about bees or pollinators. So if our topic is, a plant, shrub, or tree that attracts pollinators, which includes bees, we'll mention the benefit and identify the pollinator, and we'll always talk about that during our Zone 7 presentations. But you asked about bees, so here was a few websites that I found about bees and pollination. So Michigan State Extension had a great website on pollination and why bees are important. And then our own fairfaxgardening.org website, there was an article on bees. So what's the buzz about bees? You can also search our fairfaxgardening.org site because you clarified you were looking about pollinators, and you can search on pollinators on our website as well. There was another article or website that I found, the National Wildlife Federation on bees. And then there is a book that's called Bee Basics, An Introduction to Our Native Bees. And it's in partnership with the USDA, Forest Service, and the Pollinator Partnership publication. And that was https://pollinator.org. And so they have a nice website, and they actually said that the week of 20 through the 26th of June is actually Pollinator Week. Check out that website. Check out our Fairfax Gardening org site. We have monthly articles. We have the Instagram that you can follow that at fairfax.master.gardeners. So for even more information, check out our YouTube site. This is our second year that we're posting on YouTube. So check out our past virtual plant clinic presentations. Thank you for attending today. Hope to see you again at a future plant clinic as we talk about seasonal garden topics.